All right, buckle up, space cadets. You thought you knew the galaxy, right? All those fancy civilized aliens squabbling over trade routes and ancient artifacts? Cute. But what if I told you there's a new player in town, and they're not here to make friends or negotiate peace treaties? They're here to smash and conquer and maybe, just maybe, paint the stars green. Oh, seriously? Are we making a story about space orcs now? I think there might have been a misunderstanding when we said humans are space orcs, lol. Alright, check out this story, but first, hit that subscribe button, yeah? You think the cosmos is safe? Think again. These orcs are about to take warp drive to a whole new level of destruction and mayhem. Get ready to laugh and maybe cry a little as we witness the orcs' chaotic conquest of the cosmos. This is Orc Space Orcs Rise of the Warp Drive Fleet, and trust me, you're not ready. So, let's rewind a bit. For eons, the orcs were just orcs. Every alien wear their skin, brutal, savage, known for their ferocity and unwavering aggression. Their history? A glorious bloody tapestry of tribal warfare, planet-side skirmishes, and a constant primal thirst for conquest. They were the ultimate deathworlders, born on a planet so harsh it made your average human death world look like a spa retreat. Think of molten rivers, acid rain, and creatures that would eat a space marine for breakfast. Yeah, that kind of place. Their homeworld, Kragmar, was a forge. A crucible of fire and iron, where only the strongest, the most cunning, and the most brutally adaptable survived. Their cities weren't built. They were grown from slag and scrap, fortified against constant volcanic eruptions and territorial megabeasts. Every orc was a warrior from birth, every tool a potential weapon, every scrap of metal a resource for survival. They didn't have science in the galactic sense. They had make it work or die trying. Their engineers were less about elegant schematics and more about brute force trial and error, often involving a lot of hitting things with bigger things until they either worked or exploded spectacularly. Usually both. Their culture was simple: strength, honor in battle, and the biggest, loudest boom. They didn't do diplomacy. They did smash. Their technology, while crude by galactic standards, was terrifyingly effective. They built weapons that were less about elegance and more about sheer destructive force. Think giant clunky cannons that could level mountains and armor that could shrug off orbital bombardments. Their reliance on brute force wasn't a weakness, it was their philosophy. Why outsmart when you can just out-hit? Other galactic empires, the snooty Vlar, with their sleek crystalline ships and ancient refined culture, the hyperlogical Xylosians, masters of computational warfare and predictive analytics, the elegant Krill, with their advanced cloaking and psychological manipulation, they saw the orcs as a nuisance. A primitive, tribal species confined to their hellish homeworld, occasionally launching a crude rocket at a passing scout ship. Oh, those charmingly aggressive orcs, they'd chuckle, sipping their space tea. They had no idea. They had no idea what was brewing in the molten pits and brutal training grounds of the orcish homeworld. The Vlar, in particular, found the orcs amusing. Their scouting reports often included observations like, subject species exhibits rudimentary spaceflight, but their vessels appear to be held together by excessive welding and sheer willpower. Probability of interstellar travel negligible. They even had a popular comedy holo series about a bumbling orc trying to fix a broken hyperdrive with a hammer. Oh, the irony. See, the orcs might have been primitive, but they weren't stupid. They had a knack for reverse engineering, a terrifying ability to take something complex, smash it apart, and put it back together in a way that was simpler, louder, and infinitely more destructive. And then they found it. A derelict ancient vessel, drifting through the outer reaches of their system. It wasn't much to look at, just a rusted hulk, a relic from a forgotten galactic war, but inside was a warp drive. Now, for most species, a warp drive is a delicate piece of quantum engineering, requiring precise calculations, stable energy fields, and years of theoretical physics. For the Orcs, it was a big, glowy thing that made ships go fast. They didn't understand the science. They understood the result. They tore it apart, replicated its core components with their own brutal, over-engineered methods. And then they did what Orcs do best. They made it bigger, and louder, and more prone to exploding, but hey, that's just part of the fun, right? The first Orcish warp drive wasn't about elegant jumps through hyperspace. It was about ripping a hole in reality. Their ships didn't glide, they thrashed through the void, leaving behind trails of distorted reality, raw energy, and the faint smell of ozone and fear. The Orcish engineers, or warp wranglers as they called themselves, didn't use precise calculations. They used intuition, a lot of yelling, and the surprising amount of percussive maintenance. If it didn't work, you hit it harder. If it still didn't work, you got a bigger hammer. And somehow, it always worked. Eventually. The warp wranglers, often covered in grease, scorch marks, and a surprising amount of glitter from various salvaged components, would proudly present their latest innovation. It might be a warp drive that occasionally spat out small, localized temporal anomalies, or one that vibrated so violently it could shake the teeth out of a space whale. But it worked, and it is fast, and that was all that mattered. The first Orcish warp drive fleet wasn't pretty. It was a chaotic mess of repurposed asteroid miners, armoured cargo haulers, and even a few converted space stations, all jury-rigged with these new, unstable, but incredibly powerful warp drives. They didn't jump with precision. They ripped through space, appearing seemingly at random, like a cosmic punch to the face. One moment, empty void. The next, a hulking green-painted monstrosity, belching smoke and defiance, materializing right on top of you. Their first contact with the wider galaxy wasn't a diplomatic envoy. It was a full-scale invasion. The target? A small, unsuspecting Valar mining colony on the edge of the sector. A peaceful outpost called Xylos Prime. The Valar, with their sleek, elegant ships and sophisticated defences, were completely unprepared. They expected a few pirate raids, maybe some border skirmishes. They got a green tide of pure, unadulterated rage. The Orcish tactics were direct. No feints, no complex maneuvers, just a head-on charge, guns blazing, followed by brutal boarding actions. They didn't capture, they conquered. They didn't negotiate, they demanded. And if you didn't comply, well, let's just say the Valar learned a very painful lesson about the Orcish definition of persuasion. The colony fell in hours, its defences overwhelmed not by superior strategy, but by sheer, relentless, chaotic force. The Valar commander's last transmission was a bewildered, they're just ramming our shields. Who does that? The news spread like wildfire. The Orcish fleet, as it was now known, wasn't just a threat. It was a force of nature. Their brutal tactics, their ruthless ambition, their sheer, terrifying joy in battle. It sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened galactic empires. They didn't just defeat you. They made sure you knew you were defeated. And then they'd probably take your ship, paint it green, and use it to smash your neighbours. Xylosian conclave, ever the strategists, initially dismissed the Vla reports as exaggerated. Primitive species, prone to panic, their high command declared. Their warp drive must be a crude, short-range jump. No threat to galactic stability. But as more reports flooded in, of entire sectors going dark, of warp signatures appearing where no warp lanes existed, of Vla fleets simply vanishing, even the Xylosians began to feel a cold dread. Their predictive algorithms, designed to anticipate every possible threat, simply broke when confronted with Orcish unpredictability. How do you model chaos? Their lead strategist, a Xylosian named Unit 734, was observed repeatedly slamming his head against a data slate, muttering about unquantifiable variables. The Cathar hegemony, the galaxy's dominant military power, finally stepped in. Their Grand Admiral, Valerius, a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, scoffed at the Green Menace. "They are a rabid dog," he declared to the Galactic Council. "We will put them down." A combined Cathar-Xylosian Krill fleet, numbering in the thousands, was assembled. The largest armada in galactic history, designed to crush the Orcish threat once and for all. Valerius even had a special, reinforced cage prepared on his flagship for the Orcish chieftain he intended to display as a trophy. Oh, Valerius, you sweet, naive soul. The grand battle took place at the edge of the Cygnus Nebula, a swirling maelstrom of gas and dust. The Allied fleet formed perfect, impenetrable formations, their energy shields shimmering, their weapon arrays charged. They expected the Orcs to charge headlong into their trap. And the Orcs did, but not in the way they expected. The Orcish fleet, a grotesque collection of salvaged, patched up, and brutally modified vessels, didn't approach in formation. They swarmed. Their warp drives, unstable and unpredictable, allowed them to jump in and out of the nebula's dense gas clouds, appearing seemingly at random, striking and then vanishing again. A Cathar dreadnought would find an Orcish battle barge suddenly materialize directly in front of its bow, unleashing a volley of crude but devastating plasma cannons, before tearing a new warp hole and disappearing. "They're not fighting conventionally!" a Xylosian tactical officer shrieked, his data slates flashing red. "Their movements are illogical. Their warp signatures are too erratic to track. They're using the nebula as cover, but they're also using their warp drives as weapons." Indeed, the Orcs had discovered that by overcharging their unstable warp drives, they could create localized, violent warp distortions. Not enough for a full jump, but enough to tear holes in enemy shields, disrupt targeting systems, or even, in desperate cases, create miniature, localized black holes that would rip apart smaller vessels. It was crude, it was dangerous, and it was utterly terrifying. And yes, sometimes it blew up the Orc ship too. But hey, glorious death, right? The Kryl, with their advanced cloaking and psychological warfare, tried to infiltrate the Orcish comms. They expected to hear battle plans, tactical commands. Instead, they heard a cacophony of guttural roars, triumphant shouts, and what sounded suspiciously like Orcish battle charts, all mixed with the deafening roar of engines and weapons fire. It wasn't a military command structure. It was a collective, chaotic, and utterly fearless battle frenzy. One Kryl agent, after listening for hours, simply transmitted, "They're singing about smashing things and eating." Mostly smashing. The Allied fleet, built on logic and predictable outcomes, found themselves fighting an enemy that defied all their understanding. Their disciplined formations broke. Their morale shattered. They called it Orcish luck. But it was far more than that. It was the terrifying, unpredictable power of a species that had weaponized chaos itself. A Cathar super-dreadnought, the Imperator, found itself surrounded. Not by a coordinated attack, but by a swirling vortex of Orcish ships, appearing and disappearing, ramming, firing, and unleashing their warp distortions. Its shields, designed to withstand focused barrages, buckled under the unpredictable, multi-directional assaults. Its command bridge, filled with veteran officers, watched in horror as Orcish boarding pods, crude but effective, slammed into its hull. The Cathar, who had never encountered an enemy that preferred axes and crude blasters to energy weapons and tactical retreats, were utterly bewildered. One Orc, upon breaching the Imperator's bridge, reportedly yelled, "Surprise! We brought snacks!" before engaging the stunned Cathar crew. The Imperator fell, not to a single decisive blow, but to 1,000 chaotic cuts, each one delivered with a primal fury that the Cathar simply couldn't comprehend. The Allied fleet, utterly demoralized, began to retreat, their grand armada shattered, their belief in their own superiority utterly broken. Grand Admiral Valerius, last seen clinging to a piece of debris, was heard muttering, They painted my flagship green! The indignity!" Xylosian Conclave, observing Cathar's humiliating defeat, finally understood. The Orcs weren't just a threat, they were a paradigm shift. Their greatest strength wasn't their technology, but their sheer, unyielding, chaotic will. The fear wasn't of their weapons, but of their unpredictable, brutal, and utterly relentless nature. Their algorithms, once the pride of the galaxy, were now spitting out error messages like "Error, logic not found," and "Warning, probability of Orcish victory approaching 100% despite all data." The galaxy had changed. The old order, built on predictable logic and refined technology, was shattered. In its place, a new, terrifying, and utterly unpredictable era dawned, shaped by the green tide of the Orcish armada. They didn't seek to rule with laws or treaties. They ruled with the biggest boom and the loudest roar. The Orcs didn't pursue the fleeing remnants of the Allied fleet. They had made their point. The message was clear. We are here, we are free, and we will not be contained. The galaxy, for the first time in millennia, was forced to confront a truth it had desperately tried to bury. The Orcs weren't just another savage species. They were the cosmic wildcard, the ultimate disruptor, the force that would either compel the universe to evolve or be left behind in the dust of a forgotten past. And somewhere, a Valar comedian was frantically rewriting his Hollow series. The Orcs weren't bumbling anymore. They were just Orcs. And that was terrifying enough.